Is there a chance for a human to survive after being hanged? The answer is yes. He is one of the world's 5 most terrifying death row inmates, Dorian. Today, he was to be hanged. The prison guards bound him tightly and led him up to the gallows. After hanging for 10 minutes, Dorian dangled motionless in midair. However, just as the coroner was about to confirm his death, Dorian miraculously opened his eyes. It was all a ruse he had feigned. Dorian's body was no longer that of an ordinary human. To him, the fully armed guards were as fragile as tofu, and he swiftly killed them all. That night, death row inmate Dorian successfully escaped from prison, and his only target was Tokyo. For there, he sensed a powerful force. Determined to taste defeat, Dorian resolutely embarked on his journey. Meanwhile, 200 meters below the surface of the Pacific, in the death prison, a guard was forcing a lawyer to remove his belt. Not even a single button was overlooked, as this was the only way to ensure his safety. The arrogant lawyer did not take this seriously, questioning what danger could there be in visiting a death row inmate through bulletproof glass, even flaunting his black belt in martial arts. However, when the guard produced a photo of the last braggart's death, the once arrogant lawyer immediately became as meek as a lamb, for the inmate he was about to meet was America's most vicious death row inmate, Speck. Yet, when the trembling pair arrived at their destination, they were scared pantsless to find Speck's cell unexpectedly empty. Just then, a large hand suddenly emerged from the ventilation shaft. The man had no time to react before his head was crushed by this terrifying force. The owner of the hand was none other than the death row inmate, Speck. As a man capable of holding his breath underwater for up to 5 minutes, even a prison built at the bottom of the Pacific could not constrain him. After bursting dozens of warning heads, Speck, like Dorian, escaped the prison, and their astonishingly unified target was Tokyo. Moreover, all around the world, heavyweight death row inmates were breaking out of prison. This included Doyle, who could outrun bullets, the freak Sikorsky, who could scale a 100-meter vertical metal wall with his bare hands, and Ryuko Yanagi, who could shatter nuclear bomb-resistant glass with one hand. What could possibly motivate the world's 5 most terrifying death row inmates to escape together? The answer might just be in Tokyo. Do you know what happens when the 5 strongest death row inmates break out together? All prison guards are annihilated in mere seconds, some killed instantly while others are gruesomely dismembered, and these 5 exceptionally brutal death row inmates escaping collectively to Tokyo, all just to defeat a 17-year-old genius, Baki Hanma. At that moment, far away in a high school in Tokyo, a strong sense of crisis seemed palpable. All the teachers and students trembled simultaneously, but there was one person who remained unaffected. He was the collective target of the 5 formidable inmates, Baki Hanma. Meanwhile, a luxury car suddenly arrived on campus. The person who alighted was none other than Baki's old friend, Mitsunari Tokugawa, the de facto ruler of Tokyo's fighting sanctum. Tokugawa was immediately informed of the collective prison break of the 5 death row inmates. He had a premonition that the convicts' target in coming to Tokyo must be to challenge Baki. So, he wanted Baki to fight in a battle of the century with the death row inmates, aiming to profit from ticket sales. However, Tokugawa could never have anticipated that no sooner had he left, one of the 5 inmates, Speck, would arrive at the school, find Baki, and point a gun at him in front of everyone. Indeed, a master's entrance is always unique. Human weapons are like toys to them. Speck did not attack immediately but instead shook hands with Baki in a friendly manner. This bizarre act completely baffled Baki, but in the next second, Speck's hand suddenly broke. Baki was terrified, yet Speck wore a smirk of triumph. As he spoke, Baki instantly petrified, feeling as if all strength had been drained from his body. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Speck launched a sneak attack. He kicked Baki so hard that he spat out foam. Then, grabbing Baki by the hair, he stomped on the young genius like squashing an ant. Baki was left bloodied and battered when the local police finally arrived belatedly. However, the investigation revealed that the severed hand did not belong to the person Baki had imagined, but to a policeman Speck had attacked earlier. An uncontrollable rage quickly built up inside Baki. Meanwhile, in a park somewhere in Tokyo, the freestyle fighter Robinson was enjoying his morning run, unaware that these were the last 3 minutes of his life. The next second, a newspaper almost caused his immediate demise. Turning his head, Robinson saw it was death row inmate Doyle. Facing the unprovoked challenge, Robinson found himself utterly unable to resist. Overwhelmed by the presence of a stronger opponent, pressed step by step, Robinson could no longer bear it and grabbed the opponent's collar, trying to scare him off. but in Doyle's eyes, a fighter without a referee in a ring is nothing but trash. Having hidden blades all over his body, Doyle effortlessly sent Robinson to his demise. After death row inmates Doyle and Speck made their debut in Tokyo, another inmate, Dorian, also stirred up trouble in the city. At the holy site of karate, the Shinshinkai Dojo, an epic battle unfolded between the current dojo leader, Orochi Katsumi, and the strongest practitioner of Chinese martial arts, Kairetsu. The battle between the two kicked off with a climax. Although young, Orochi Katsumi, well versed in his father's techniques, matched Kairetsu blow for blow. However, facing Kairetsu, who had almost defeated Baki, Katsumi's lack of real combat experience showed, and he narrowly lost. Tasting defeat for the first time, Orochi Katsumi decided to humble himself and learn from ancient Chinese martial arts, while he was passionately addressing his disciples. Death row inmate Dorian appeared. His target was to challenge Katsumi's father, a master of karate. After being refused by Orochi Katsumi, Dorian lost his temper and attacked, throwing his shoe and landing a whip kick on Katsumi. The force of the blow left the young man in shock for a long time, but this was just a warm-up for Dorian. A death row inmate's strength is one thing, but dirty tricks are Dorian's true forte. The honor-bound Katsumi was soon hanging awkwardly in mid-air. As he was about to suffocate, Katsumi mustered all his strength for a whip kick to Dorian's forehead, followed by a beautiful counterattack. But Dorian's deceit knew no bounds. Taking advantage of Katsumi's distraction, he cut through his carotid artery with a splintered wooden board. As blood gushed forth like a fountain, the duel ended in Dorian's victory. However, at that moment, Kairetsu issued a challenge to Dorian. Unexpectedly, Dorian burst into tears in front of everyone, stunning all onlookers. But in the next second, Dorian resorted to dirty tricks again, plucking a nose hair and shooting it straight at Kairetsu. However, he underestimated Kairetsu's sharp perception. After tumbling in mid-air, Kairetsu not only dodged the sneak attack but also seized the opportunity to strike Dorian directly. From an outsider's perspective, although this kick seemed to give Retsu the upper hand, only he knew how the inconspicuous nose hair nearly blinded him. This made it evident how formidable his opponent was. Kairetsu readied himself and was fully alert for the battle, but Dorian gave him no chance. Escaping under cover of flames, such a troublesome opponent wasn't the only one. Relying solely on Baki might not be enough. Thus, Tokugawa, eager to stage a battle of the century, had to start looking for suitable candidates. In his view, former Kanji Igari and the former judo champion were both excellent choices. However, while everyone was discussing the timing of the match, death row inmate Sikorsky made his move. As the judo champion was about to strike, two sharp knives were already embedded in his hands. Then, Sikorsky, with almost perverse strength, slashed 3 bloody wounds across his face, easily defeating the world judo champion. Perhaps in the eyes of a death row inmate, these ring fighters simply don't qualify as worthy opponents. Tokugawa brought Sikorsky to the Tokyo Fighting Sanctum. As Katsumi stepped into the venue, he smelled the blood in the air. This activated every fighting fiber in his body. However, he wasn't the only one feeling this way. Dorian, Ryuko Yanagi, Speck, and Doyle were also drawn here by the scent of blood. Although the 5 death row inmates were strangers to one another, their instincts as fighters told them that everyone present was an exciting opponent. The next second, all 5 inmates simultaneously unleashed a strong will to fight. The terrifying murderous intent even twisted the air, as a massive battle was about to erupt. But a man's figure broke the tension. Karate master Orochi Dappo, Jiu-Jitsu master Guki Shibukawa, ancient martial arts master Kairetsu, fighting maniac Kaoru Hanayama, and the world's strongest man, Baki Hanma. Like the inmates, they had also converged here, feeling the aura of strong opponents, ready for a battle of the century. Here, there were no rings, no rules, no referees. Combatants could strike at any time and any place, for only such conditions could be considered true fighting. Orochi Dappo immediately targeted Dorian, as the grudge from a dojo challenge had to be settled. Just as the two were about to clash on the streets of Tokyo, Kairetsu, also harboring animosity towards Dorian, appeared. Dappo knew Retsu's intentions, but he certainly wouldn't back down and struck first. A whip kick smashed Dorian's face so hard it deformed, and he instantly fell to his knees in pain. But nobody noticed that he again resorted to dirty tricks, launching a sneak attack. Flames instantly engulfed Dappo. However, when the flames dissipated, Dappo, using his expert karate air wall, perfectly blocked Dorian's fiery assault. Including Kairetsu, everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. Could this be the power of a top karate master? But just then, a strange silver light flashed by. The next second, Dappo's arm was severed in two, as Dorian had wrapped a fiber thread around his wrist during the attack. This special fiber thread, only 4 microns thick, finer than a spider's silk, had a tension strength of an astonishing 200 kilograms, easily capable of slicing through human flesh with a slight pull. However, merely losing a hand was not enough to make him concede defeat. Dappo had always hated throat-slit training because it involved striking bamboo, causing countless dislocations and fractures to his fingers. He constantly fantasized about fighting with just his arms if he had no fingers, as he watched himself seriously injured and losing the fight. Dappo fiercely punched Dorian and then made a disheveled retreat. When Dorian rose again, Dappo, along with Kairetsu, had already disappeared into the crowd, leaving Dorian alone on the street, laughing wildly. However, as this great battle just ended, another was about to ignite. At that moment, Baki and his girlfriend Koja were comfortably enjoying their time together. Just as they were about to share a kiss under the beautiful night sky, Death Row inmate Speck appeared. Finally, unable to withstand Baki's intimidating gaze, Speck decided to strike first. But just then, a large hand suddenly appeared, covering Speck's mouth and forcibly dragging him away. Seeing Hanayama Kaoru, whose physique was no less impressive than his own, Speck was instantly excited and suddenly leapt up, kicking Hanayama and causing his nose to bleed profusely. Despite this, Hanayama remained calm, slowly removing his clothes to reveal a body as solid as steel, along with the family tattoo on his back. It is said that each head of the Hanayama family must have the tattoo of a chivalrous samurai inked on their back to honor an unnamed hero who greatly indebted the Hanayama family. However, in Kaoru Hanayama's eyes, such tattoos always lacked soul. Thus, he went alone into the lair of a rival gang, personally killing hundreds of their members, including their leader. After everything, Hanayama was covered in cuts, but these were precisely what he desired, because only scars could perfect the samurai's peak. Even Speck could not help but admire this, expressing his respect to Hanayama in his own way. After a series of blows, Hanayama still did not flinch, which angered Speck. Using all his strength, Speck smashed Hanayama's head against a telephone pole and then dragged a bench over, intending to finish him off. Unexpectedly, Hanayama chose to endure it head-on, absorbing the blow with his formidable physical strength. This extreme display of physical power excited Speck tremendously. Seeing his opponent get ready to counterattack, a bizarre scene unfolded next. Dropping his weapons, Speck assumed the same posture as Hanayama. True warriors are always barehanded. For Speck, using weapons was already the greatest sympathy he could offer his opponent. Having witnessed Hanayama's ultimate physical strength, Speck was thrilled. The flurry of rapid strikes he delivered left Hanayama powerless to retaliate. And this was Speck's signature technique, the breathless assault. He could unleash all his strength in a non-stop assault for 5 minutes without breathing, until his opponent was completely downed. To refine this technique to its peak, Speck had practiced frantically after his escape. On the Statue of Liberty, weighing 204 tons, he left countless punch marks. The statue had internally crumbled under Speck's relentless assault. Seeing such an important landmark about to collapse, the US military had to intervene, securing it with steel cables. This shows just how terrifying the breathless assault truly is. Now, with Hanayama being overwhelmingly suppressed by Speck, it seemed he was about to be beaten to death on the spot. At this critical moment, Hanayama gave up defending and used his body to withstand Speck's attacks, then gathered all his strength in his right fist and exploded. After punching Speck away, Hanayama stood firm like a war god. In contrast, Speck found it difficult even to stand after such a powerful punch, although Speck's body was strong enough to withstand modern armor-piercing bullets. What of that? Kaoru Hanayama's punch had knocked Speck to the ground, unable to rise. Though severely injured, Speck still shouted defiantly. If that was the case, Hanayama could only use his iron fists, pinning Speck to the ground and ruthlessly grinding him down. After several hard hits, Speck feigned surrender, only to pull his old trick again, stuffing a bullet directly into Hanayama's mouth. The next second, with a series of loud bangs, sparks exploded into the sky like shooting stars. When everything quieted down, the resilient man still hadn't fallen. Despite his face being severely maimed by the explosion, Speck was stunned. What kind of monster was this? Suppressing his inner fear, he threw a heavy punch at Hanayama, which was countered and sent flying by Hanayama's swift retaliation. As Speck lay stunned from the electric shock, Hanayama also collapsed from exhaustion. Hours later, Hanayama dragged a barely alive Speck to the police station, presenting him as a gift to the authorities. However, Hanayama hadn't expected that just 2 minutes later, Speck, supposedly in shock, charged at him again. After being brutally beaten by Hanayama, Speck managed to escape from the police station within 2 minutes. After overturning the police car that Hanayama was in, Speck, with an iron rod he had snatched from somewhere, smashed it hard onto Hanayama's already injured face. Compared to Hanayama's soft-heartedness, Speck knew this battle was actually a slaughter. As long as the opponent hadn't fallen, his attacks would never stop. By that point, Speck had no limits left. Not only did he brutally assault Hanayama, but he even pulled out a pistol and shot through his knees, then grabbed Hanayama's arm, intending to break his neck like a karate master breaking a stone. However, despite several forceful kicks, Hanayama's sturdy body remained unharmed. Seeing this, Speck pulled out his pistol again and aimed it at Hanayama, but the next second, a burst of golden light exploded from Hanayama's eyes. Then, he quickly turned his head, letting the bullet pass through the corner of his split mouth, startling Speck, who had risen unexpectedly. Hanayama seized the opportunity to pin Speck to the ground and pummeled him relentlessly. The square echoed with Speck's pig-like screams, and after an indeterminate beating, Speck suddenly covered his eyes. The next second, a flashbang went off, and Hanayama instantly lost his sight, standing dazed. After the flashbang took full effect, Speck managed to free himself and climbed on top of Hanayama, executing a nearly perfect chokehold. Those familiar with judo know that in such a situation, the locked person cannot escape, but there are always exceptions. Hanayama's hands possessed incredible strength, and moments later, with a snap, he tore Speck's arm right off. A scream of agony echoed through the streets of Tokyo, and in a fit of rage, Speck drove his middle finger deep into Hanayama's left ear. Yet, this terrible strike became Speck's swan song. Enduring immense pain, Hanayama reached out with his right hand and used all his strength to crush his neck completely. As Speck's body fell heavily, the equally injured Hanayama, standing on shattered knees, roared skyward, declaring his ultimate victory. Baki, seen by his math teacher as nothing more than a physically gifted freak, useless in practical applications. After all, in modern society, there are too many machines that can replace human strength, and in the teacher's view, no one could possibly jump to the 5th floor by sheer force. But just as the teacher finished mocking, death row inmate Doyle jumped into the classroom. Doyle's appearance instantly quieted the entire classroom, and after punching the teacher away, Doyle advanced towards Baki step by step. Baki obviously knew Doyle's purpose, but not wanting to reveal his strength in front of everyone, he took advantage of Doyle's distraction to kick him away, then immediately leapt out the window, leaving Doyle prepared for battle behind. However, he didn't know that more than one death row inmate was lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, Baki felt a chill on his back and instinctively crouched down. The next second, a sharp scythe just grazed his scalp as it flew by. Baki turned his head and saw that the assailant was one of the death row inmates, Ryuka Yanagi. After a brief encounter, Ryuka Yanagi, without a word, swung the 2 sickles he held in his hands. Even the formidable Baki couldn't help but take a couple of steps back from the overwhelming sense of oppression. The next second, Ryuka Yanagi made the first move, his sickles seeming to come alive, each strike aiming directly at Baki's vital points. Seeing such ruthless aggression, Baki didn't hesitate. He tore off his shirt and instantly entered battle mode. With his rapid reflexes and precise control over every muscle, Baki perfectly dodged the cunning sickle attacks. Ryuka Yanagi was taken aback, impressed by the mere 17-year-old Baki's formidable strength, a true prodigy. He then simply discarded his sickles, opting to fight Baki with his true strength. However, just as tensions were escalating, a pot of boiling water suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Everything happened so fast that Ryuka Yanagi could only catch the scalding water with his bare hands, but a second later, he realized he had been tricked. Seeing his own trick easily succeed, Jiu-Jitsu master Guki Shibukawa seemed very pleased with himself, finally avenging his previous defeat. It turns out that when Ryuka Yanagi first came to Tokyo, he had immediately sought out Shibukawa for a duel. He had similarly used a pot of water to distract Shibukawa and won the fight easily. Since then, Shibukawa had harbored resentment. Now, giving Ryuka Yanagi a taste of his own medicine felt immensely satisfying. Furious and refusing to concede, Ryuka Yanagi swung the pot at Shibukawa, but Shibukawa countered by slamming his chin down hard to the ground. The exquisite jiu-jitsu move left even Baki dumbfounded. After enduring Shibukawa's relentless taunting, Ryuka Yanagi roared and leaped to his feet. The next second, blood splattered. Shibukawa was injured. Baki, watching on the side, was stunned, wondering what exactly had happened. At that moment, Ryuka Yanagi slowly opened his palm to reveal a hidden weapon shaped like a tiger's claw. Shibukawa then pulled Baki into the fray. Planning to outnumber Ryuka Yanagi, The battle between the three was imminent. Shibukawa threw a handful of blood to obscure Ryuko Yanagi's vision. He then charged forward, locking Ryuko Yanagi in place while Baki's attack followed swiftly. Although it was their first time cooperating, their coordination reached an astonishing level. Seeing himself surrounded, Ryuko Yanagi felt a surge of fear, thinking he might die here today. As he tried to find a gap in their assault, he was caught off guard and Shibukawa locked him from behind once more. In a critical moment, Ryuko Yanagi displayed incredible physical prowess. With an aerial kick, he not only neutralized Baki's frontal attack but also used the momentum to flip and break free. At that moment, when Shibukawa saw Ryuko Yanagi discard the tiger claw, his relaxed expression vanished. He knew the man was about to unleash his full power. With a casual palm strike, Baki was knocked down instantly, a terrifying sight that even shocked the Jiu-Jitsu master Shibukawa. But this was the terror of Ryuko Yanagi, who had trained to compress the oxygen in the air to below 6%. At such a low oxygen level, it immediately becomes a lethal poison, causing instant loss of bodily function with a single breath. Ryuko Yanagi had used this technique in his training on various materials, eventually learning to create a vacuum in his palm. His power was so great that even a meter-thick reinforced glass could be easily shattered by him. Listening to Ryuko Yanagi boast about his secret technique, Shibukawa's fear only grew. Fortunately, after receiving a late emergency call, local police arrived. Ryuko Yanagi had no choice but to leave. Pausing the first round of the battle, together, the group gathered at the Tokugawa residence to strategize. Although Hanayama had won, he was severely injured. Doppo started off disastrously, being disabled from the first strike, and embarrassingly, Baki and Shibukawa, despite their 2-on-1 advantage, were countered and killed by their opponent. Tokugawa was so furious his face distorted as he raged at everyone. However, just as the meeting's atmosphere hit rock bottom, Baki decided to step outside to clear his mind. The sudden appearance of death row inmate Dorian ignited everyone's anger once more. Seeing this, Dorian fearlessly pulled out a gasoline can, intending to bury everyone there, but the next second, Orochi Katsumi arrived. His eyes bloodshot at the sight of his enemy, Katsumi struck first with a fierce front kick to Dorian's body. And that wasn't all. After a few days, Katsumi seemed like a changed man, stringing together a series of smooth combos that left Dorian powerless to fight back. Finally, under the shocked gazes of the onlookers, he threw a lit lighter onto the gasoline-soaked Dorian. In an instant, a fierce blaze engulfed Dorian completely. When the flames died down, Dorian lay on the ground, severely injured, his body nearly devoid of intact skin. However, just when everyone thought Dorian had been defeated, a shocking reversal ensued. As people hesitated whether to call an ambulance for the half-dead Dorian, Kairetsu noticed something amiss. Indeed, after a light test attack, Dorian was not only still agile but, after taking a deep puff of smoke, showed no internal injuries apart from the external burns. Clearly, all this was a ruse created by Dorian. Orochi Doppo could no longer contain his urge to duel with Dorian, but at that moment, another man walked in. Kayasumi Kato, the master of Orochi Katsumi. Although Kata's karate master was Orochi Doppo, he had integrated karate into real combat, becoming Tokyo's only underground karate master. Right from his entrance, Kata demonstrated the power of combat-oriented karate. Catching Dorian off guard, he delivered a sweeping kick that Dorian couldn't recover from for a long while. Dorian tried to retaliate, but Kato easily dodged. With a slight smile, Kato placed his hands on his hips, gauging his opponent's limit, then sliced down with a hand like a blade. Accompanied by a flash of cold light, one of Dorian's ears was severed. Everyone on the scene was stunned. This was the power of real combat karate. Kato was using a material similar to Dorian's heavenly silkworm thread. At first glance, it seemed inconspicuous, yet possessed tremendous cutting power. However, at that moment, the unexpected happened. A few cold flashes darted through the air. The next second, Kato and Katsumi were both tightly bound, and the culprit was undoubtedly Dorian. At some point, he had wrapped them in fiber threads, waiting for a perfect opportunity to counterattack. As his son and student faced imminent death, it was Doppo who intervened at the crucial moment, with a casually delivered chop, laden with the refinement of his life's work. Doppo's palm, trained over many years, had become a formidable weapon. Seeing his cherished fibers so easily shattered, Dorian made another astonishing move. Struggling, he opened his mouth wide and pulled out a hand grenade he had hidden inside his body. The next second, a loud explosion engulfed everyone present. Dorian and all other figures at the scene vanished. Investigations revealed no casualties. Clearly, Everyone had managed to escape before the blast. The scene shifts to Dorian, clad in a coat, walking the streets of Tokyo, who, after several turns, dives into a sewer. This was indeed Dorian's residence, but just as he was tending to his wounds, a footstep sound like a thunderclap startled him. Kata had actually followed Dorian to this place, and a great battle was about to ignite. Confidently, Kata struck first with a whip kick aimed directly at Dorian's chin. Unexpectedly, Dorian not only easily dodged the attack but countered with a heavy punch that sent Kata flying. The terrifying force shocked Katu, wondering how Dorian's strength had soared so dramatically in just a few hours. But what shocked him even more was watching Dorian crush a wine bottle and smear his hands with the broken glass. A fearsome weapon was born, one that looked horrifying just to behold. At that moment, Dorian was firing on all cylinders, a casually thrown punch nearly exploding Kata's head. Refusing to stay down, Kata leapt up, aiming a kick at Dorian while airborne, but Dorian, fearless, countered with another heavy punch that pierced his left foot. Taking advantage of Kata's momentary vulnerability, Dorian hurled a handful of broken glass directly at Kata's eyes. Kata was caught off guard and immediately lost his vision. Seizing the opportunity, Dorian landed another heavy punch on Kata's face. The terrifying force sent Kata flying dozens of meters. In just a few seconds of combat, the chief disciple of the martial arts god was defeated so miserably. Katu, undressing, prepared for a serious fight, but Dorian pulled out a wine bottle and struck him with it. Seemingly unsatisfied with just hitting the head, Dorian grabbed the bottle and stabbed it into Kata's face. Then, with a twist of his right hand, a spray of blood burst forth, leaving his face a mangled mess. Dorian's assault didn't stop there. He plucked a nose hair and shot it, injuring Kata's eye once more. Despite the intense pain, Kata pulled out the nose hair, but then something bizarre occurred. Dorian began singing to himself, reveling in the torment he inflicted on Katu. His storm-like barrage left Kata bleeding profusely. Just as Dorian was about to deliver the final blow, Kata threw the wine bottle into the air, shattering it and successfully distracting Dorian. He then leapt into the air, crushing the remaining bottle on Dorian's face. At that moment, Kata's blood seemed to boil. The practical karate finally shone through, turning all the humiliation he had suffered into a series of cunning and fierce attacks rapidly unleashed on Dorian. Seeing victory within reach, Kata's onslaught became even more ferocious, but then Dorian bizarrely started clapping. Such mockery instantly ignited Kata's fury, driving him to abandon the bottom line of a martial artist and employ every dirty trick he knew. Finally, with a move called Double Dragons to the Sea, he blinded Dorian. Dorian, severely injured, collapsed into a pool of blood, with Kata howling to the sky in victory. But then, an astonishing scene unfolded. A familiar clapping sound instantly pulled Kata back from his joy. He turned to see Dorian completely unharmed. Kata's ultimate battle with Dorian seemed catastrophically dire, but in reality, it was a one-sided crush by Dorian. Kata quickly snapped out of the world he had fabricated. Staring at the unscathed Dorian, Kata was confused. He had clearly defeated Dorian head-on just moments ago. Could all that have been an illusion? Yes, this was another of Dorian's special techniques, hypnosis. He could use a rare form of hypnosis to trap his opponents in a highly concentrated mental state, making them believe they were living in a fantasy world from which they couldn't escape. At that moment, Kata realized that he was leagues behind Dorian in terms of strength. Yet, as a disciple of a martial god, he could not allow himself to concede defeat to his opponent. Even knowing victory was impossible, this steadfast man refused to show any sign of weakness. After taking a direct kick from Dorian, the severely injured Kata could barely muster his fighting strength. He could only watch helplessly as Dorian once again struck, cutting deep into his neck artery, with Kata's body falling heavily. The sewer showdown ended in Dorian's complete victory. The next day, after finishing his training, Kairetsu's attention was caught by a punching bag not far away. He pressed his hand against the bag and, to his surprise, heard a faint heartbeat. Anxious, Retsu quickly tore open the bag with a palm strike. Sure enough, inside was a bloodied man, none other than Katu. Though he was not yet dead, he was barely distinguishable from being so. His body was riddled with fractures in over 100 places, and his internal organs were severely damaged. Such grievous injuries were appalling, and the fact that Dorian had hidden Katu inside the dojo was a clear provocation. The current dojo master, Orochi Katsumi, immediately summoned everyone and issued a martial world hit order on the fugitive Dorian. Instantly, all of Tokyo was in an uproar. Police, firefighters, waiters, and taxi drivers alike Every member of the dojo joined in the manhunt without exception. Can you imagine what it's like for one man to stand against 10,000? After Orochi Katsumi issued the hit order, it didn't take long to locate Dorian. Surrounded by thousands, any ordinary person would tremble with fear, but these people were no threat to Dorian, because there was an unwritten rule: fights must always be one-on-one, bare-handed. After easily dispatching one member, Dorian strode confidently towards the amusement park behind him. He sensed a strong presence there, waiting for him. As the lights came on, a tall man suddenly appeared and viciously kicked the toy Dorian was on. Dorian's first opponent of the night was Kata's classmate, Atsushi Sudo. Upon encountering each other, a fierce battle ensued. Sudo took the initiative with a powerful punch, but Dorian blocked it easily. A counter elbow strike left Sudo with a nosebleed. Unyielding, Sudo threw a powerful kick, causing Dorian immediate pain. Then, unexpectedly, he turned and ran, leaving Sudo dumbfounded. Without thinking, Sudo had to chase after him. The two caught a moving roller coaster. As the roller coaster ascended slowly, Dorian revealed a sinister grin under the night sky. Sudo, realizing the peril of their high altitude, was shocked yet couldn't suppress his desire to fight. But just as he was getting used to the situation, Dorian disappeared from sight. Suddenly, a killing intent emerged from behind, and before Sudo knew it, Dorian was executing a nearly perfect chokehold. As Sudo was about to suffocate, a sudden turn of the roller coaster flung them both off. Though he narrowly escaped death, Dorian was more attuned to this rhythm of combat, managing his body while launching powerful attacks. Sudo soon became an easy target. Just when the roller coaster reached maximum speed, Sudo remembered a stepping technique taught by his master. This ancient samurai technique, designed to cope with the turbulent battles at sea, was called Sansen. Although not a secret technique, it proved miraculous in this context. With the Sansen technique aiding him, Sudo quickly turned the tide. As victory seemed within reach, Sudo's smile emerged. However, Dorian made another astounding move. Leaping from 100 meters in the air, he grabbed Sudo. As they plummeted, Sudo, awakened from his fear, managed to position Dorian beneath him to cushion the impact. Despite this, the fall from such a height was devastating, and though Dorian cushioned him, Sudo was severely injured. Mysteriously, Dorian, who took the brunt of the impact, was unscathed. Lying on the ground, a dying Sudo stared blankly at Dorian, questioning why. With a slight smile, Dorian revealed the fiber wire in his hand. The cunning man had already prepared a buffer by hanging the fiber wire on a street lamp. Sudo, completely unguarded, charged straight toward the ground. After learning the truth, he slowly closed his eyes. In this battle, he lost not to strength, but to cunning. Under the street lamp, Dorian indulged in a triumphant howl. However, at that moment, three familiar faces appeared. Leading them was Orochi Katsumi, barely able to contain his fury, wishing he could flay and dismember Dorian on the spot. But the next moment shocked everyone. Kairetsu bowed deeply to Dorian, showing him the utmost respect. It turned out that Kairetsu and the fugitive Dorian were from the same martial arts lineage, which left everyone stunned. Despite his reluctance, Retsu couldn't erase the memories that haunted him. When young Retsu had not yet earned the title of Sea King, even though his talent and strength far surpassed his peers, his master still felt he did not qualify to be the new Sea King. The reason was that he had not completed the Sea King's essential task, rock striking. Rock striking, quite literally, involves hitting large rocks to shape them into smooth spheres without using any tools. Every disciple must create an exceptional piece to earn the title of Sea King. 40 years have passed, and no one has surpassed the previous Sea King's creation, which was so massive, it couldn't even fit in the rock striking hall. Initially, Retsu was confident in his own abilities, but upon seeing his predecessor's work, he realized that even 10 more years of effort wouldn't be enough. A tunnel several meters long was beyond Retsu's current capabilities, yet that man had done it in just one night. Faced with this enormous challenge left by his senior, Retsu wasn't frightened but instead felt his fighting spirit soar. Finally, after 50 years, Retsu succeeded in surpassing Dorian and became the new Sea King, bound by the rules of their martial lineage. Even though Dorian had committed crimes warranting the death penalty, Retsu still stepped aside to give the duel to a more suitable candidate. War God Doppo gladly accepted the challenge, especially since two of his disciples had either died or were grievously injured. Such a deep grudge could only be cleansed with Dorian's blood. He stripped off his shirt and immediately entered combat mode. With a single leg push, he exploded forward, his punch nearly hitting Dorian's forehead. After his first strike missed, Dappo switched to a series of vicious kicks. Dorian hurriedly defended while looking for a chance to counterattack. In the midst of their fierce battle, an astonishing scene occurred. Dappo's previously broken left hand miraculously healed. Dorian stared in disbelief at Dappo's left hand, unable to comprehend. This resilient man had returned in such a regal manner. Just 3 days prior, Orochi Dappo had sought out a doctor friend with his severed hand. In just 3 hours without anesthesia, his arm was successfully reattached. Now fully healed, War God Dappo was determined to avenge his severed hand. With a powerful punch, Dorian felt a moment of intense pain. The force of the punch unexpectedly powerful. It struck Dorian so hard that he spat out a wine bottle from his stomach, and the liquid in the bottle was a highly corrosive acid. Seeing his ace exposed unintentionally, Dorian didn't hesitate and launched a sneak attack. This time, Dappo's highly focused combat state allowed him to dominate, his powerful attacks putting Dorian in great peril. However, Dorian lived up to his title of Sea King, flipping and leaping into the air, aiming a mysterious move straight at Dappo's crown. But Dappo had anticipated this and repelled Dorian with a punch. The first round ended with both men's gazes locked intensely on each other. Their powerful auras almost materialized around their bodies, and almost simultaneously, they launched into another fierce bombardment. Dappo initiated with a sweeping side kick that hit Dorian, then explosively pushed off the ground, planning to pursue his advantage. Unexpectedly, Dorian, despite being hit hard, struck a bizarre pose and began dancing on the spot. Dappo, puzzled, dared not attack rashly and casually threw a pebble to test. But before the pebble could even touch him, Dorian crushed it into powder. Using the powder to disrupt Dappo's vision, Dorian attempted to defeat him in one fell swoop, but he had underestimated the war god's strength. Even with his vision impaired, Dappo's extensive combat experience and superb fighting skills still allowed him to dominate Dorian. Seeing Dorian kneeling on the ground, crying bitterly, Dappo thought the battle was decisively won, but in just a breath, Dorian reappeared behind him. In contrast, Dappo stood frozen, as if bewitched, completely unresponsive. At that moment, Dappo, like Kata before him, fell into a dream meticulously crafted by Dorian, engaging in an intense battle with an imagined Dorian in his mind. Hunter's Eye, seeing the dire situation, tried to wake Dappo from the dream. However, he underestimated the power of Dorian's hypnotic skills. Dappo was fully immersed in the dream, oblivious to reality. Just as Dorian was about to finish off the war god, an astonishing reversal occurred. In the dream, Dappo miraculously blocked Dorian's attack, a feat terrifying to behold. Even though his body was hypnotized, the duel Dappo imagined in his mind mirrored reality. Could this be the true power of a war god? Undeterred, Dorian swung his hand again, his nails sharp as blades, slicing through Dappo's eye mask. He attacked again, aiming to pierce Dappo's head, but in the next instant, a punch as heavy as a sandbag exploded forth, shattering Dorian's fingers instantaneously. With one move disabling Dorian's hand, War God Dappo went all out. Not only did he perform the feat of catching a blade barehanded, but he also struck Dorian so hard that blood flew everywhere. With each crisp sound of breaking bones, Dorian's ribs shattered into fragments. But Dappo didn't stop there. He unleashed 2 whip kicks, breaking both of Dorian's hands and feet, effectively rendering him helpless. With the situation decisively under control, Dappo unexpectedly ceased his attacks. He intended to leave Dorian's life for that man to personally execute. Indeed, it was Katu, whom Dorian had turned into a mummy. At that moment, Katu, still in a deep coma due to his severe injuries, seemed to sense the power of vengeance, his body's instincts compelling him to step toward Dorian. With a roar, Kata's inner hatred erupted, his aura so formidable that Dorian could not muster the courage to resist, even breaking down into tears on the spot. Dorian, severely injured by Dappo, lost all will to fight and knelt down, weeping and begging for forgiveness. Kata's attack ultimately stopped mid-air. Deep pity in his heart made him spare Dorian. However, Kata could never have anticipated that his kindness would trigger Dorian's brutal retaliation. It turned out Dorian had been acting all along. Pleading on his knees wasn't the first time he'd used this tactic. His aim was to eventually turn the tables with his ultimate secret weapon, and that secret weapon was a miniature bomb hidden in his arm. Dorian leaped from the window, initiating his campaign of vengeance. The scene shifts to a victorious Dappo, excited to show his wife his healed left hand, but as he stepped through his front door, he found his home in disarray. His beloved wife was missing, and a lighter on the floor stood out ominously. In an instant, rage shot to his brain. Dappo couldn't believe Dorian's audacity. Unbeknownst to him, Dorian, the instigator, was hiding nearby. Taking advantage of Dappo's frenzy, he slapped him. In that moment, the bomb in his arm detonated, engulfing them in flames. As the smoke cleared, Dorian's pain singing resumed, indifferent to the agony of his arm being blown apart. The close-range explosion left Dappo severely injured. His face was now unrecognizably marred. Upon learning of Dorian's actions, Kairetsu could no longer honor their brotherhood and decided to challenge Dorian. Misfortune should not extend to family. Dorian was ruthless in his pursuit of victory. Though undefeated, he had never truly won. Dorian laughed, seeing victory as glory and complaints as excuses for the weak. But the next second, as Kairetsu's heavy punch approached his face, Dorian realized the folly of his pursuit of victory. Just as Kairetsu had said he had never won a battle, after this fight, Dorian, sustained by the notion of victory, collapsed mentally, unable to accept that he had never truly won, and went completely mad. Sikorsky intended to kidnap Koju as leverage against Baki, yet he could never have foreseen the unleashed fury of Baki fighting for Koju, his attacks like a tempest. But unexpectedly, the moment Baki turned his head, the downed Sikorsky vanished. Baki sensed trouble and hurriedly turned to check, only to find his beloved already abducted. Indeed, in the eyes of the world's 5 most dangerous convicts, Baki was still just a kid. Sikorsky had kidnapped Koju into a building, waiting for Baki to walk into his trap. Unexpectedly, it attracted the strongest creature on Earth, Yujiro Hanma. Sikorsky laughed, having aimed for a small fish only to hook a giant crocodile. Their eyes met, and the air around them thickened with the tension of battle. Yet, the anticipated great battle did not occur. Sikorsky calmly sat aside. Though he appeared calm, lethal intent was hidden beneath. The strongest creature's perception was terrifying. He had already seen through Sikorsky's plan to mask his sneak attack with a facade. He even mocked his fighting skills to his face, calling them child's play. Sikorsky was shocked. Yujiro Hanma's strength far surpassed his expectations. However, as one of the top 5 convicts, he couldn't stand such humiliation. After a roar, he launched a devastating punch at Yujiro Hanma, but the next second, this powerful punch was easily caught by a large hand. Oliva had arrived. Oliva's appearance surprised Yujiro. When he learned that the top 5 convicts were gathered in Tokyo, he flew into a rage. There couldn't be anyone freer than himself in the world. Thus, Oliva boarded a jet personally prepared by the warden and headed straight for Tokyo. As the two masters converged, Sikorsky's battle instantly ignited, setting the stage for an ultimate brawl. However, just at this critical moment, that man finally arrived in time, with his beloved kidnapped. The fire of anger within Baki soared. At the peak of his rage, he moved. The terrifying power Baki unleashed was beyond Sikorsky's expectations. After a series of frenzied strikes, Sikorsky was punched out of the window, falling from 100 meters high. One can imagine the outcome. Baki, still warm with rage, effortlessly disposed of one convict. At that moment, Oliva approached, offering himself up, and Baki didn't hesitate to unleash a flurry of punches, leaving Oliva with a nosebleed. Oliva was speechless, taking a beating for no good reason. Even Yujiro wouldn't dare hit him so hard. Today he had to teach Baki a lesson. In combat mode, Oliva transformed, taking Baki's punches and sending him flying with a counterstrike. Baki then realized the depth of the man before him. However, just then, a familiar voice suddenly rang out. Baki sensed trouble and leapt back to distance himself. After ensuring his safety, Baki realized the newcomer was Sikorsky, who had fallen from the building. Seeing the shock on Baki's face, Sikorsky's confidence surged. As the only convict with such powerful finger strength, he had once climbed a missile silo over 100 meters tall with just his fingers. Compared to that, climbing the rough exterior of a building was effortless. The battle between them reignited. Sikorsky's attacks were fierce, but Baki dodged them perfectly. Yet, as one of the convicts, Sikorsky resorted to every dirty trick. Baki's palm was punctured by nails, and Sikorsky kicked him while he was unguarded, sending Baki rolling out several meters. Just as Sikorsky was about to follow up on his advantage, the local police arrived late, forcing Sikorsky to retreat. Though he successfully rescued his beloved Koju, the grudge for kidnapping his girlfriend was not settled. So, while Sikorsky was showering, Baki, dressed for combat, tracked him down again, facing his nemesis. Baki didn't even give him time to get dressed. Launching a crushing leg drop, This kick nearly sent Sikorsky straight to heaven. He never expected this 17-year-old high schooler to possess such terrifying explosive power. Yet, more surprisingly, that kick was just Baki's warm-up exercise. Taking advantage of his opponent's downfall, Baki grabbed a bucket and shoved it over Sikorsky's head. A barrage of iron fists rained down furiously, leaving Sikorsky completely dazed. But Baki showed no signs of stopping, delivering a harsh kick to Sikorsky's groin. The soul-deep pain spread instantly, filling the building with Sikorsky's screams. Moments later, Sikorsky passed out from the pain. However, just then, a familiar voice came from behind Baki. Oliva's appearance startled Baki, and upon learning that he intended to take Sikorsky away, Baki exploded with rage. An angry punch was swiftly thrown, but Oliva easily blocked it with one hand. Clearly, the still green Baki was no match for Oliva. As they stood off, the battle took a sudden turn. Sikorsky sprang up and landed a heavy kick on Oliva's large face. Looking at the unharmed Oliva, Sikorsky appeared calm, but his heart was full of shock. No one had ever withstood his full-force strike head-on, yet this man not only survived but didn't even step back. This showed how immense Oliva's physical strength really was. But as one of the top 5 convicts, Sikorsky had his pride too. Using all his strength, he unleashed a barrage of hits on Oliva, but no matter how fierce his assault, Oliva stood like a war god, unmoving. Oliva's counterattack, a seemingly effortless punch, sent Sikorsky flying with a clang. The terrifying force instantly killed the strongest convict. Baki watched incredulously. Was this the true power of the strong? This must be the most beautiful policewoman I've ever seen, dressed in a sexy yet dignified uniform with seductive lipstick on. Yet at that moment, an astonishing twist occurred. Who would have thought a convict would appear in police uniform at police headquarters? Oliva was clearly startled by Doyle, momentarily forgetting to react, and took a vicious elbow to the face from Doyle. In their first encounter, convict Doyle taught this arrogant man a lesson. His words were full of provocation, but Oliva, unfazed after hearing them, calmly locked the door. He wanted a real man's battle with convict Doyle right here. Excitement lit up in Oliva's eyes. The battle with Kairetsu permeated every corner of the room, but just as Oliva was about to enter combat mode, he suddenly saw stars and uncontrollably fell. It turned out that Doyle had coated the blade with muscle relaxant, taking advantage of Oliva's inability to fight back to intensify his attacks. The heel of a high-heeled shoe tore through Oliva's face again, as blood sprayed wildly from such a heavy blow. Oliva attempted to counterattack, but what awaited him was another heavy punch from Doyle. With that punch, Oliva fell and didn't get up. Just as victory seemed within Doyle's reach, he slowly approached to finish Oliva off. But at that moment, the battle shifted again. Oliva burst forth with surprising strength. Grabbing Doyle's ankle with one hand, he slammed him down like a little chick, the powerful impact even shaking the entire building. Oliva picked up Doyle to deliver a fatal blow, but was unexpectedly cut across the palm by a blade Doyle had pulled out. Seizing the opportunity, Doyle's powerful left punch distorted Oliva's face. The next second, a cold glint flashed, and the blade hidden in Doyle's left hand plunged into Oliva's body. Oliva watched in disbelief, never imagining Doyle would stoop so low. Gaining the upper hand, Doyle didn't give his opponent a chance to breathe, unleashing a series of kicks on Oliva, driving the dagger even deeper. The severely injured Oliva fell to the ground, powerless to continue fighting. However, just then, the intense battle finally drew the attention of the police. Upon opening the door, they were greeted by a scene of bloodshed and Oliva, blade in hand, standing still. As everyone knows, in the face of absolute power, all techniques are meaningless. For Oliva, the world's strongest freeman, only pure strength is a true measure of power. However, to a judo practitioner who values technique above all, Oliva's views are mere fantasy. Only after seeing Oliva effortlessly defeat an Olympic-level competitor did everyone believe his claims were true. To save face, they sent out a champion much taller and bigger than Oliva. But the next second, an astonishing scene unfolded. Oliva, using only his hands, performed a human windmill. The judo students watched in disbelief. Could such terrifying strength truly belong to a human? After easily defeating the champion, Oliva, like a child, asked the police chief to award him a black belt, but was flatly refused. The reason was that Oliva's moves were not judo techniques. With no other choice, Oliva had to face off again. This time the opponent started with a signature shoulder throw, aiming for a quick win, but as soon as he exerted force, he felt Oliva behind him unshakable like a towering tree. In contrast, Oliva grabbed his collar with one hand and fiercely threw him backward. flipping him over. The terrifying force was comparable to the impact of a large excavator. After receiving the chief's affirmation, Oliva took just 5 minutes to knock down all the students in the judo dojo without feeling any pressure, deciding then to end this boring game. Just as Oliva was about to step out of the dojo, that man finally made his move. Seeing Guki Shibukawa step forward, Oliva's eyes gleamed with gold light, because defeating this man would make him the first to achieve a black belt in a single day. The clash between the two was imminent. Oliva used the same move, grabbing Shibukawa's collar, intending to win with one blow using his monstrous strength. Unexpectedly, this usually foolproof move was trivial in the hands of the martial saint. Shibukawa not only effortlessly neutralized all of Oliva's force but also twisted his arm into a pretzel. Such a terrifying scene shocked the spectators, and even the strong Oliva had to admit defeat on the spot. The man who has honed the Shunshin Ryu karate to its peak is called Kosho Shinogi. For him, the human body holds infinite possibilities. With proper training, every part can become a lethal weapon. Now fully accomplished in martial arts, he needed a strong opponent for sparring. Coincidentally, Doyle, also keen on unlocking bodily potentials, was in Tokyo. Under the powerful intelligence network of the Shinshinkai Dojo, Doyle's location was quickly pinpointed. Unaware his whereabouts had been exposed, Doyle was leisurely displaying the blades hidden throughout his body. However, these seemingly powerful weapons had a fatal flaw in the eyes of the general. They hindered normal physiological functions. Doyle had thought of this, installing a switch mechanism in his finger joints, which allowed the blades hidden throughout his body to be extended or retracted at will. More terrifyingly, Doyle's bodily modifications didn't stop there. He even went as far as to install a mini air cannon in his fist at a great cost. Just a slight demonstration of the powerful air blast left the general in shock. While the general was still digesting Doyle's formidable power, the man swift as the wind appeared. The arrival of Kosho Shinogi took Doyle by surprise, but that was all. Unexpectedly, Kosho Shinogi didn't play fair. Before he even finished speaking, he delivered a throat-kicking blow that nearly knocked Doyle out cold. Kosho Shinogi slowly withdrew his now smoking right foot. Looking down at the fallen Doyle with mockery, Doyle, defiant, tried to stand for another round. As his fingers triggered the switch, a vicious elbow strike smashed toward Kosho Shinogi, who deftly dodged by tilting his head, and returned the elbow strike to Doyle. Poor Doyle was knocked down again, and Kosho Shinogi slowly approached, his mockery now unrestrained. Unbeknownst to him, he had stepped into Doyle's range. With a loud bang, the air cannon in Doyle's palm blasted, wrecking Kosho Shinogi's jaw. Luckily, it was a minor issue. Kosho Shinogi quickly snapped his dislocated jaw back into place. The humbled Kosho Shinogi dropped his arrogance, facing the strongest convict with a serious expression. Meanwhile, Doyle finally decided to unleash his true power for the battle, activating the switch in his finger joints. Blades protruded from all over his body, and a great battle was inevitable. As Doyle pressed forward, his oppressive presence made Kosho Shinogi break out in cold sweat. Ultimately, the immense pressure caused Kosho Shinogi to crack first, throwing a full-force punch that turned out to be futile. With a switch activation and another deafening boom, Kosho Shinogi was blasted away in an instant. Blood mixed with shattered flesh scattered around the room, marking Kosho Shinogi's defeat. He probably never imagined someone would implant a bomb in their own body. Few know there's an even bigger boss in the Hanma family. Jack Hanma, the strongest creature, Yujiro Hanma's son, Baki's half-brother. His strength surpasses what ordinary people can comprehend. To surpass his father and his extraordinarily talented brother, Jack, who was frail as a child, chose to forge his path to strength through medication. Though this approach brought him endless pain, it also endowed him with a physique strong enough to contend with Baki. Their brotherly showdown was certainly the most thrilling. Yet despite his efforts, Jack was defeated by the slight edge due to Baki's overwhelming protagonist aura. After his defeat, a pained Jack decided to further upgrade his battered body. He sought a legendary doctor to perform a risky limb lengthening surgery, where the bones in his limbs would be completely shattered first, then forcibly stretched through external forces to achieve increased height. The limit for an average person is stretching 2 body parts in one direction, but Jack chose to stretch all 4 limbs in 2 directions simultaneously. Stretching 8 points at once caused hellish pain. Fortunately, Jack endured it, and his height shot up by 30 centimeters in 1 year. After his transformation, Jack not only gained strength but also changed in appearance, such that even Kairetsu, who had previously interacted with him, didn't recognize him at first. Upon learning his true identity, Kairetsu was stunned. marveling at Jack's transformation while also curious about his true purpose for returning. However, Kairetsu never imagined that Jack's transformation and his purpose were both related to the same person. After Kosho Shinogi's crushing defeat by Doyle, his brother Kahuku Guki sought Jack's help for revenge. In gratitude to Guki for performing the bone regeneration surgery, Jack agreed to deal with Doyle. However, he didn't tell Kairetsu this, leaving Retsu deep in thought as Jack walked away. But as Kairetsu entered the elevator to go home, he collided head-on with convict Doyle, setting the stage for a fight. Surprisingly, after just a glance at each other, they agreed to go to a bar for a drink. After a drink, Kairetsu spoke first, angrily condemning Doyle for using a bomb to cripple Kosho Shinogi. Doyle smiled without directly responding, but his eyes burned with murderous intent. Slowly picking up a candle, he suddenly launched a sneak attack. But Kairetsu was ready and threw a flying knife straight into Doyle's left eye. In Kairetsu's view, these convicts are not true martial artists, and they should be fought with their own methods. The fierce fire swallowed Doyle, and his screams echoed painfully, just as Doyle was about to burn alive. Kairetsu grabbed a fire extinguisher and saved him. It wasn't out of mercy but to send Doyle off in the most painful way. Suddenly, a cold glint flashed, and a sharp flying knife pierced Doyle's body. Then, one knife after another rained down on Doyle. Sensing disaster, Doyle tried to flee but was caught by Kairetsu's rope. As he fell, the knives pierced deeper into his body. Doyle tried to resist, but Kairetsu remained unmoved. With a swift motion, Doyle was tied up like a bundle, unable to fight back. At that moment, another cold flash appeared. It was the legendary Blood Shadow Knife. The appearance of the Blood Shadow Knife made Doyle truly feel death's approach. Where the blade swept, blood followed, and after a painful howl, Doyle only wanted to flee. After throwing a flashbang, Doyle's form suddenly vanished. Seeing the empty sewer, Kairetsu seemed slightly disappointed, but as he hesitated, a sharp knife deeply pierced his body. Doyle, in his last moment, delivered a death blow, but it did nothing to Kairetsu. In return, he unleashed a barrage of heavy punches, killing Doyle with spurting blood. The heavily injured Doyle knelt, seemingly accepting his impending defeat. Unbeknownst to him, it was all a ruse. As Kairetsu prepared to use a staff to send him off, Doyle seized the chance. His finger quickly triggered the chest bomb, which exploded instantly. But shockingly, Kairetsu avoided the fatal blast. Out of tricks, this arrogant convict finally faced his end. Kairetsu's attacks were fierce, leaving Doyle unable to counter. As Doyle was about to die, Kairetsu shouted and launched a powerful punch. At that last moment, a needle appeared, and Kairetsu fell unconscious. Doyle was stunned. Looking up, he saw a 2-meter-tall man covered in muscles. Yes, it was Jack, who came on behalf of Kahuku Guki to avenge Doyle. Despite facing an already battle-weary Doyle, Jack did not take advantage of his weakened state. In his view, a martial artist must defeat their opponent honorably. Thus, Doyle escaped a potential disaster with Jack's help, dragging his battered body away. At that moment, he saw two hoodlums trying to harm Kairetsu, and the hidden sense of justice within Doyle surfaced. He not only drove off the hoodlums but also stood guard like a protector all night. The next day, when the unconscious Kairetsu finally woke up, he saw the bloodied ground and Doyle. Now unconscious, Kairetsu instantly understood that Doyle had risked his life to protect him. Though unsure of Doyle's motives, Kairetsu knew he couldn't let Doyle die. Kairetsu carried Doyle on his back and ran towards the Shinshinkai dojo, where advanced medical equipment awaited. On the way, Kairetsu used all his strength, achieving lightning speed. Just as the dojo came into view, a wide river blocked his path. Taking a detour would add at least a kilometer, highly detrimental to Doyle's time-sensitive condition. After a moment's thought, Kairetsu decided to cross the river on foot. Calculating that the river was at most 10 meters wide, he planned to step over 800 times to cross the water with ease. Kairetsu's outrageous feat stunned the nearby bystanders. Wondering if this was the legendary art of water walking, Kairetsu successfully brought Doyle to the Shinshinkai dojo, where emergency treatment quickly pulled Doyle out of danger, and he awoke from his coma. Upon hearing the news, Kairetsu personally prepared lunch for Doyle. After some pleasantries, Doyle expressed his thanks to Kairetsu. Retsu thought Doyle intended to mend his ways, smiling contently. However, just 2 days later, Doyle stirred up trouble again. He went alone to the Shinshinkai dojo, initially expressing his thanks, but he came to Tokyo to experience failure, so eliminating all enemies was his goal. With that, Doyle pulled out a protective suit from his backpack and scattered a bag of flour throughout the room. Next, he lit a lighter, and with a deafening explosion, the Shinshinkai dojo was blown up. Afterward, Doyle boldly walked out, but Doppo was waiting for him. Doppo believed the matter must end here and suggested they settle it in the open space ahead. To provoke Doyle, Doppo mocked him for using explosives to ambush and lacking real strength. Doppo declared he could defeat Doyle without using karate. This enraged Doyle, who leaped up and threw a fierce punch. However, Doppo was cunning. Contrary to his word, he used karate and quickly knocked Doyle unconscious. When Doyle awoke, he found himself back at the Shinshinkai dojo, with Katsumi sitting before him. Because of the explosion, Katsumi suffered second-degree burns all over and had his handsome face scarred by Doyle. Katsumi now had one thought: to beat Doyle until he begged for mercy. Thus, their battle lasted a day and a night, with Katsumi repeatedly knocking Doyle out, resuming the fight when he awoke. After countless knockouts, Katsumi gave Doyle one last chance to beg for mercy, or he would unleash his strongest punch. Doyle stubbornly closed his eyes, refusing to utter a word of surrender. Having no choice, Katsumi unleashed a powerful punch, flattening Doyle's face. Though he defeated Doyle head-on, Doyle's indomitable spirit left Katsumi feeling ashamed. In his hatred, he had lost his reason, while Doyle knew clearly why he was fighting. In comparison, Doyle deserved the victory more. So, Katsumi asked his disciple, David, to convey his concession, which unexpectedly earned Doyle's deep respect. Doyle showed Katsumi the highest form of submission, and this time, the strongest death row inmate Doyle finally tasted defeat. That night, Baki tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Feeling guilty about his argument with Koju earlier, he planned to apologize after waking up, but Koju unexpectedly came to him, undressed, and hugged him from behind. Though Baki had faced many challenges, he was inexperienced in matters of love, and was initially frozen by Koju's actions. Seeing Baki hiding under the covers, Koju began to caress him. Finally, her actions aroused the teenage Baki. He turned and embraced Koju, but at that moment, his father Yujiro was watching them intently. Baki expressed his displeasure, but Yujiro harshly rebuked him. A strong person must conquer everything, and anyone standing before you must be defeated. With that, Yujiro vanished into the night, leaving Baki and Koju behind. Yujiro's interference killed Baki's mood for further intimacy, so they made a decision. The next time they met, it would be to settle the score. But just 3 days later, Koju challenged Baki, wanting a showdown that night. Upon receiving the challenge, Baki rushed to the destination. Seeing Koju, Baki knew the duel would be intense. Indeed, Koju's first move, a kiss, almost made 17-year-old Baki surrender, because the battle was so fierce. It ended in a draw. The real drama came next, as Baki unleashed his lifetime of skills in the second round. Koju, unfazed, displayed her own formidable strength. As the battle intensified, they forgot the passage of time. For 3 days, the fight continued, and finally, Baki used his remaining strength for a final blow. After an unprecedented, brutal battle, Baki's tricks were exhausted, and he still couldn't fully defeat Koju. Just as he planned to continue, an uninvited guest appeared. After his growth, Baki's aura and pressure rivaled Yujiro's. Baki's transformation was astounding, his speed and strength reaching new heights. Even the formidable Ryuko Yanagi was only on the defensive. Seeing Baki's strength, Ryuko Yanagi decided to use his trump card. His arm became as flexible as water, and with lightning speed, he tore off a piece of Baki's muscle. Blood sprayed, and before Baki could react, Ryuko Yanagi attacked again. Baki instinctively blocked but was seriously injured, his body bruised and torn. He only smiled, saying that if Ryuko Yanagi only knew how to whip like a child, he should surrender early. Ryuko Yanagi, angry, stated that he had mastered his teacher Ma's ultimate skill. Baki ignored him and mimicked Ryuko Yanagi, imagining his body as flowing water. With a sudden burst, he delivered a fierce kick to Ryuko Yanagi. Ryuko Yanagi was torn apart by the kick, shocked that Baki had learned his ultimate skill just by watching, showcasing his terrifying talent. Ryuko Yanagi, defiant, tried to counterattack, but Baki didn't plan to give him a chance. After a series of whippings, Baki locked Ryuko Yanagi, intending to dislocate his joints. At the last moment, a black leg suddenly struck from behind. Luckily, Baki reacted swiftly, leaping into the air to dodge gracefully. When Baki looked up, he saw that it was Sikorsky, who had escaped from the hospital. Seeing his nemesis, Sikorsky attacked with a fierce paper knife, but Baki dodged easily. Seeing Baki's increased strength, Sikorsky decided to team up with Ryuko Yanagi, setting the stage for a fierce battle. Even facing 2 death row inmates, Baki remained confident. However, Koju, on the sidelines, worried about her lover's safety, so she clenched her small fists, ready to join the fight. Baki reassured her, saying that these trash didn't need her help. With that, Baki displayed overwhelming power, tossing the 200-pound Sikorsky like garbage with one hand. Then, he approached them slowly, slapped them both, making their heads spin. Ryuko Yanagi, now on the ground, was stunned, realizing that Baki's strength was beyond description. However, no matter how strong he was, Ryuko Yanagi believed his poison hand could defeat Baki. To craft the poison hand, Ryuko Yanagi painstakingly collected the world's most poisonous toxins, combined them with a secret formula and urine, and fermented them for 82 days. Finally, he stirred the concoction 1,000,000 times, creating the poison hand. Now, the poison left death in its wake, and Ryuko Yanagi knew the toxins had entered Baki's body from the whippings. All he needed to do now was stall Baki until he succumbed. Unexpectedly, the poisoned Baki showed no change in strength. After a short clash, Baki knocked them both down. Even Hanayama, watching, marveled at Baki's readiness to challenge Yujiro. Hanayama envied Baki, staring at Koju. With his friend watching, Baki made a surprising decision. He grabbed Koju and ran, leaving Hanayama and the inmates bewildered. Hanayama was shocked, realizing he was being used as a shield, and chose to leave. Seeing Baki and his companions leave, the ignored death row inmates looked at each other. Ryuko Yanagi, feeling humiliated, suddenly began to cry. He was the most tragic of the 5 inmates. After his crushing defeat by Katsumi, Doyle's mindset changed dramatically. He stopped seeking strength and instead embraced failure. With his wish fulfilled, Doyle decided to leave Tokyo and return to where he belonged. Doyle asked Katsumi to teach him some karate as a token of their friendship. Katsumi demonstrated and patiently corrected Doyle's movements. The good times flew by, and soon it was time to go. Katsumi called out to Doyle and then untied his black belt, tossing it to him, a perfect gift between men. Afterward, Katsumi turned and left, knowing this might be their last farewell. On the deck, Doyle gazed into the distance, wondering about his future. Unexpectedly, a sinister laugh echoed. It was Ryuko Yanagi, who berated Doyle for reconciling with an enemy, calling him a traitor. "Since you want to go, why don't I send you on your way?" The battle between them was about to ignite, and Doyle struck first, crushing his glasses to disrupt Ryuko Yanagi's vision. Then, he leaped forward with a heavy punch toward Ryuko Yanagi, who dodged and returned a punch to Doyle. The next second, Doyle sensed something was wrong. Ryuko Yanagi's punch wasn't a heavy blow, yet Doyle went blind instantly. Blinded, Doyle stood frozen, then smelled smoke and moved forward to investigate. He didn't expect to be choked from behind by Ryuko Yanagi using the gift Katsumi had given him. As he was about to be strangled to death, Doyle struggled with all his strength to break free, but Ryuko Yanagi punched him, sending him flying. Fortunately, Doyle reacted in time and grabbed the ship's railing. At that moment, Ryuko Yanagi drew a sword, but surprisingly, the katana was of poor quality and broke after just a few chops. Ryuko Yanagi looked on in disbelief, thinking Doyle's mechanical arm saved him. However, such luck wouldn't come again. Ryuko Yanagi raised the sword again, and Doyle, knowing escape was hopeless, let go and fell into the sea. In a mysterious Russian prison, an inhumane test was underway. The military brought in the world rock climbing champion, challenging him to climb out of a missile silo without any tools. Seeing the 100-meter-high walls with no footholds, the champion was stunned. Climbing out would require finger strength at a hellish level, able to hold onto a fingernail-sized point and read a short novel. However, the monster Sikorsky, whom the Russian military thought of as a freak, met his nightmare Jack on a Tokyo street. To Jack, they were both power-hungry brutes, and now, having crossed paths, a fight was inevitable. They went to a restroom, planning a real man's battle there. Jack struck first with a powerful punch, but Sikorsky dodged. Sikorsky stepped on the urinal, leapt up, grabbed the smoke alarm with his right hand, and landed a fierce kick on Jack's face. He aimed to bridge the height gap, but how long could he last? Jack grabbed Sikorsky's leg and tried to pull him down. However, he underestimated Sikorsky's finger strength. Despite breaking the alarm, Sikorsky clung on. Jack changed tactics and punched Sikorsky, making him vomit instantly. Sikorsky then entered a phone booth, his 1.9-meter frame cramping the small space. Jack, who towered over Sikorsky, joined him, and the innocent bystander was stunned. Sikorsky excelled in the confined space, limiting Jack's advantages. Sikorsky thrived, attacking freely, while Jack was restricted. Unable to counter effectively, Sikorsky brutally beat Jack, shaking the booth violently, but Sikorsky's attack was just scratching the surface, while Jack's powerful punch shattered the glass. Sikorsky, frightened, tried to flee, but Jack punched the booth, sending it flying 100 meters. The impact knocked Sikorsky out. When Jack woke, all was dark. He felt cold glass, deducing he was still in the booth, but Jack was gone. Then, lights came on, followed by loud cheers. Sikorsky realized he was in an underground fighting arena. It turns out all this was orchestrated by Tokugawa, who demanded that Jack and Sikorsky have a real fight in front of the crowd. Given that Sikorsky wasn't skilled in genuine combat, Tokugawa suggested he could use any weapon. This was a huge advantage for Sikorsky, who felt the pressure even after seeing Jack's muscular build, but his fighting spirit soared amid the cheers of thousands. As the fight began, Sikorsky immediately sprang into action, landing 2 fierce straight blades on Jack's robust arm, leaving deep blood streaks. Then came a brutal combination that pummeled Jack. However, these attacks, which would normally thrill onlookers, felt like a massage to Jack. Jack endured Sikorsky's full-on assault before easily hoisting him onto his back. Then he used all his strength to throw Sikorsky away. The unfortunate Sikorsky flew like a cannonball, slamming into the opposite wall. Seeing the significant gap in their strength, Sikorsky decided not to engage Jack directly anymore. He leaned on the railing to taunt Jack, while secretly removing a nail to use as a weapon. Seeing Jack's immense power, Sikorsky grabbed a cane from an audience member to use as a weapon, but surprisingly, even when faced with a metal cane capable of piercing a body, Jack didn't even consider dodging. His body had been tempered countless times, his muscles strong enough to resist any metal. Sikorsky, undeterred, pulled out the hidden nail and shot it at Jack. However, Jack caught the flying nail with his teeth, then chewed it into a pulp. Seeing such a terrifying sight, Sikorsky thought to himself, "This guy isn't human." The massive gap in strength made Jack lose his desire to fight, so he left the arena. In his place came a short man with a childlike face. When Jack withdrew and a short man took his place, the audience mocked him as a loser. However, not everyone was clueless. Tokugawa recognized the man as Gaia, who nearly defeated Baki. Gaia's entrance drew boos from the crowd, but he smiled and roared, stunning everyone. His roar overpowered the voices of tens of thousands of people. The unluckiest was Sikorsky, who was temporarily deafened by Gaia's roar. After silencing the crowd, Gaia began his match with Sikorsky. It said Sikorsky excels at using any object for combat, like knives or guns. With that, Gaia threw all weapons on the ground, saying Sikorsky could use anything, while he needed nothing. This infuriated Sikorsky, who charged at Gaia, but in the next moment, Gaia displayed his terrifying strength. With a light flick, flying sand particles pierced into Sikorsky like bullets. Sikorsky, who used to torment others, was now helpless against Gaia. For Gaia, even a handful of water could be deadly. Moreover, the sand contained teeth and fragments from past fighters, making Gaia's every attack as powerful as a bullet. Soon, Sikorsky's body was covered in blood holes. The excruciating pain engulfed every inch of his skin. After countless sand attacks, Gaia finally stopped. Surprisingly, this made Sikorsky focus entirely on his injuries. In an instant, the pain seeped into his bones, causing him to tremble all over. However, to his despair, the fierce attack was merely Gaia's warm-up. Now, it was time for him to show his true strength. Gaia scooped up some sand and threw it into the air, quickly covering the area in dust. Within moments, Gaia vanished from sight, leaving the onlookers stunned, including Sikorsky. Sikorsky focused, trying to locate Gaia, but it was futile. Suddenly, Gaia attacked from behind with a devastating low blow. Sikorsky endured the pain and saw a vague figure in the sand. It was Gaia. Gaia used the sand to hide himself. Realizing this, Sikorsky tried to find Gaia's weakness. Unfortunately, Gaia blended into the environment perfectly, making him invincible. Soon, Gaia blinded Sikorsky. Gaia decided not only to defeat Sikorsky physically but also to break his spirit. He told Sikorsky that he would attack every 10 seconds and began his countdown. When the 10 seconds passed, Gaia attacked. Even knowing the timing, Sikorsky couldn't retaliate with his blind eyes. The feeling of waiting for death in darkness quickly broke Sikorsky's spirit. Eventually, he even abandoned his remaining dignity. And in front of everyone, Sikorsky knelt down and cried for mercy. Seeing her lover's lifeless face and empty body, Koju wept. She took Baki to the hospital, where they received shocking news from the doctor. Baki's body was filled with a mysterious toxin. If it weren't for Baki's strength, he would have died. The culprit was Ryuko Yanagi's poison hand. Ryuko Yanagi also poisoned convict Doyle. Oliva found Doyle hiding in a cave, barely alive from the toxin. Now, the 5 convicts were either severely injured or reduced to idiots. Only Ryuko Yanagi had yet to taste defeat. But today, he received a challenge from Marshal St. Guki Shibukawa. This battle would determine the strongest and decide life or death. Ryuko Yanagi arrived early at the park, but it wasn't Guki Shibukawa who appeared. Instead, it was a more fearsome man, ancient jujitsu master Motobe Izo. Ryuko Yanagi didn't know Motobe's identity, but his intuition told him that Motobe was formidable. Indeed, Motobe struck first with a fast slash that even Ryuko Yanagi couldn't catch. In an instant, his thigh was pierced. Then, a chain shot out, injuring Ryuko Yanagi's mouth. Blood and teeth scattered. And in just 3 seconds, the first round ended with Ryuko Yanagi's defeat. Badly injured, Ryuko Yanagi struggled up, drawing 2 sickles for a counterattack. But Motobe didn't even glance at him. Ryuko Yanagi prepared to go berserk, but Motobe was faster, closing the distance and tossing him aside effortlessly. Seeing his opponent's strength, Ryuko Yanagi decided to use his full power, but as he prepared his poison hand, Motobe's sword flashed, and a severed hand fell from the air. The battle ended decisively, and Motobe intended to finish off Ryuko Yanagi. At that moment, a man's appearance halted everything. Motobe was shocked and drew his sword, aiming it at Yujiro, but Yujiro broke Motobe's famous sword with ease and walked towards Ryuko Yanagi. Yujiro smiled slightly, and the pressure he emitted made Ryuko Yanagi tremble. Ryuko Yanagi deeply regretted coming out, knowing he might encounter Yujiro. Fortunately, Yujiro didn't strike hard, merely declaring Ryuko Yanagi's defeat. At this, Ryuko Yanagi unexpectedly retorted to Yujiro, "Declare my defeat? Although you're the strongest, my opponent today wasn't you. What right do you have to declare my defeat?" This shocked Motobe, who couldn't believe someone spoke to Yujiro this way. Yujiro's pressure intensified, nearing a breaking point. However, the next moment, Yujiro laughed freely, but his smiling face was frightening. At that moment, Guki Shibukawa arrived, seeing Ryuko Yanagi defeated, knowing he missed the show. But in the next second, Yujiro punched, and Ryuko Yanagi's head burst instantly. Ryuko Yanagi lay on the ground, his fate uncertain. Thus, all 5 death row inmates were defeated in Tokyo. This was Baki's closest brush with death, his body wrapped in bandages, hooked up to medical devices. Even advanced equipment couldn't stop the poison from spreading. Although the culprit, Ryuko Yanagi, had died, his poison still tormented Baki. Baki's friends gathered, and Kureha delivered a grim prognosis. The poison had reached his bones, incurable, and all they could do now was pray. Hearing this, Koju, unable to accept Baki's impending death, ran away to cry. Then, a young man approached. He was the boxer's son. Seeing Koju, he felt a strange emotion. Knowing she was crying for a loved one, he gently comforted her and gave her a lucky charm. Afterward, he left. Back at the hospital, the news broke that Baki had vanished. Baki knew his time was short, and staying in the hospital was awaiting death. So he took Koju and left. They went to where Baki trained as a youth, meeting old friend Andu. Seeing Baki in such a state, Andu was shocked, recognizing he was poisoned. Luckily, Andu knew some medicine and began making an antidote, but it tasted so bad that Baki vomited. In the following days, Baki and Koju enjoyed a wonderful time, fishing by day and happily growing closer at night. They even visited Baki's old friend, the ape. Having fulfilled his wishes, Baki returned home with Koju, where Kaya Retsu awaited. Retsu had traveled far to find Baki and, with Tokugawa's help, took him to his childhood training ground, Shaolin Temple in China. Only there could Baki be saved. The Centennial Chinese tournament was approaching. Retsu urged Baki to participate because Ryuko Yanagi's poison was incurable, and fighting might activate his potential, giving him a chance. However, knowing her lover was entering a strong tournament, Koju was resistant. Baki was also worried until Retsu mentioned Yujiro would participate, and Baki agreed immediately. Seeing her lover determined, Koju reluctantly nodded. However, the biggest problem was entry. Baki was only 17, and his battered body was ineligible. Retsu recommended Baki to his master, who initially refused, until Retsu said Baki had defeated him, and the master agreed. However, Baki had to prove his strength, so a qualification match began. Baki's opponent was Zhao, young but strong, a contender for the next Kaiu. Their battle was imminent. Zhao Kaiu attacked first, but the unguarded Baki startled him. Recovering, Zhao Kaiu thought Baki was mocking him. He attacked fiercely but couldn't touch Baki. After several futile attacks, Zhao Kaiu realized Baki's strength, especially since he fought while injured, and surrendered, giving Baki the spot. The Chinese tournament began, top fighters gathering to compete for the Kaiu title. Who will win? Let's wait and see.